Good morning and good afternoon to everyone. If you don't know me, my name is Tori Clark, and I am the Assistant Athletic Director of Student Athlete Development at the University of North Texas. I'm so excited to welcome you to our webinar entitled Safe and Sound. And this is a collaboration from MOAA and N4A exploring all the ways to maintain a safe workplace, not only that thrives in production, but also with the culture that allows professionals to feel safe, valued, and supported. We would like to thank the N4A and MOAA leadership for continuing to support the professional development of practitioners through this production, and for all of you all joining us today. So before we get actually into the meat of our discussion, we're going to take a quick poll. That way we can understand who all is in the room. So I do believe our handyman, Zach, behind the camera is going to drop that into the chat, and we're just going to give that a couple of minutes for you all to go ahead and complete that poll.
Hey, Tori.
Yes, ma'am.
This is Ayana from the committee. The survey has D1 and two D2s.
Ooh, thank you so much for that. What, Zach, is there any way to kind of redo that poll? That way we can actually show, homage to Division 3, please?
I see you, everybody. If we could please use the second D2 as the 3, that would be great.
Thank you, Zach. And thank you, Ayana, for pointing that out for us.
No problem.
All right, just going to continue to take a couple of more minutes, or a couple more seconds for that matter. All right, so it looks like we've got some results. All right, so we've got, a couple of coaches in the room, couple of internal, external roles. Okay, bet that sounds really good. Oh, but also looking at like describing the work cultures. Okay, we got some that can be authentic. Okay, prioritizing mental health. Ooh, high value for overall supportive. I like that. But we got some that feel not supportive. Maybe hopefully our discussion today can kind of, change that dynamic for you all. And then they said, so we had a few that said all of the above. So sometimes maybe supportive and then other spaces not supportive. Kind of understand that. And then we're looking at, okay, we've got a few that say openness and is the key to psychological safety, and then also being supportive as well. That's good. Fear is a really good one as well. And then trust, because we all understand that in order to feel safe and secure in where you are, you got to have trust. So I do appreciate you all for your answers. Thank you so much for being open and vulnerable with all of us, even though some of us are strangers. But we're going to go ahead and start our presentation on psychological safety, and then we're going to move into a roundtable panel discussion where you hear from a few different stakeholders within the industry, and maybe some of those outside that have different perspectives on what psychological safety is and how you can implement that within your respective roles. And then lastly, we're going to shift into breakout rooms that allow you to actually dive deeper into those conversations and pretty much like learn from those who are either inside the same role or adjacent to the role that you all are in. But right now, I'm going to go ahead and kick it off to our main people of the hour, Ivan and Mallory. Go ahead and get us underway.
Thank you, Tori, for getting us started here. Super excited to have an opportunity to speak to everybody today. My name is Mallory Poole. I have the privilege of serving as an associate athletic director at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. I'm going to go ahead and screen share because that is also one of my duties here. But again, super excited to talk to the group today. Certainly, I think it probably goes without being said that, psychological safety means something different to everybody. And, I've had an opportunity to be a student athlete, to coach, now serve is in this kind of administrative capacity. So I help oversee student athlete development areas. I help support our HR teams, serve as a sport administrator, and whatever else they need me to do. But I'm going to kick it over to my pal, Ivan, for his intro.
Appreciate you, Mallory. Well, thank you everybody for showing up today, and thank you, MOAA and N4A for having me. Founder and CEO of The Zone, former athlete as well. Has been in the wellness space for over a decade. Being an athlete and navigating really a tough time through injury is what kind of sparked The Zone. And The Zone, as some of you may know or may not, is a mental performance platform enhancing athletic organizational well-being. We created a software that drives more efficiency for college athletic programs, mental health care system. So we've been doing that since 2021 with some of you all or some of your peers. So really excited to have this conversation today.
Awesome. So I'll just disclaimer here, as we talk about this topic, certainly I wouldn't consider myself a content expert, but we all are responsible for shaping our environments and for upholding, some of the behaviors and standards associated with how we can, support each other. So I think one thing that Ivan and I wanted to start with, there's going to be opportunities to share throughout our conversation. So we wanted to ensure that everybody felt safe to share. So in that name, we're going to really respect each other, and what's said in our room and in our time here today will stay here. A big component of feeling psychologically safe is being yourself and being your authentic self. So we're going to really encourage folks to settle in on that today. And then certainly we're all here to learn and to grow. And so participation will be key.
Thank you. Some of the key points that we'll touch on today is, what is psychological safety and why is it important, right? As you all may know, and everybody kind of has their own definitions, but it leads into the same things, where individuals feel most comfortable expressing themselves, taking risks, and engaging in open dialogue without fear or negative consequences, right? So, as you go through today and really take notes or learn from each other, you want to keep that in mind, and how do you become an advocate and create psychological safety, whether you're a leader or you're new in college athletics, what are the ways that you can, or your coach, what are the ways that you can kind of create it or, be an advocate for it is super important, because sometimes we want to create it, but we got to ask ourselves, are we the ones that's actually creating it for our peers as well? The balance between safety and accountability, a lot of times we see a lot of programs that we work with, it's a generational gap. It could be, right? And I think the biggest thing here is trust. To be honest, to be transparent, trust has to live there. If it's not, it's just one thing being said to one person and somebody taking it different way. And the last portion that we'll really harp on is, what are the effects, when psychological safety, is missing. And you'll see a big number that, may set everybody back, but this is an important dialogue to be having, but then also how do we create sustainability around?
So along those lines, as Ivan and I were kicking the ball around the room and helping set the stage for today's discussion, we were talking about how do you even really get a pulse on where you are and kind of where your organization lies. And so there's a professor at Harvard, Dr. Edmondson, who kind of set some of these questions up to help get a sense. So we're not gonna go through all of these in this moment, but I think as you're evaluating your own personal position, these are some questions that I think can kind of give you a barometer as it relates to sort of how you show up in your space and how you feel within your environment. And I think Ivan touched on it. A lot of it is how are we operating and behaving, and it really can tie back to those core values. It was a big part of our discussion when we were getting ready for today's seminar was, how are we navigating hard decisions, and how do we support our teammates through different times. And certainly, that sense of feeling like you can, present a solution or have an innovative idea that's going to be celebrated even if it's not successful. is a big part of it. But again, how are we also balancing taking risks and also making sure that we're still doing our job? And I think, making sure that we're being honest with ourselves as it relates to what are my core functions and am I showing up and delivering on those every day, is really what helps establish some of that trust, and certainly what helps establish some of that credibility within your respective unit.
All right, so we'd love for you all to kind of share, whether you write it in the comments or you want to speak out on this, but how are you creating it, psychological safety, or how do you advocate for it? I think the biggest thing to really think about is when you show up to the workplace, or you show up, how are you showing up? And we're not always 100%. And, are you 70% that day? Give us your 70, right? But make sure that the person next to you, there's a lines of communication, clear communication, right? Understanding how people receive information, not how you like to be told information, right? Leading by example, if you see others acting in a different way that, doesn't fit the right safety measures, you don't have to kind of follow those aspects, right? Accountability to self, inclusivity, and these words are always kicked out, but these things actually end up creating a great, safe work environment. Learning from mistakes together, and honesty the right way. I continue to preach that because the trust leading to the honesty is super key. Whether you're a coach and there's a new mental health professional on campus that really doesn't have understanding of how everything works, you can actually bring them into your program and introduce them, and your student athletes will follow suit, right? So a lot of times we've seen that specific use case end up working. But yeah, just supporting each other in the day-to-day works, because we're all there. You're all there trying to kind of accomplish the same thing at the end of the day.
So in the spirit of participation, I don't know if one of our colleagues is keeping an eye on the chat, but would love to hear from the group as it relates to ways that folks are advocating or creating psychological safety within their teams before we move on.
We see some in the chat. Does anybody want to speak out?
What are you seeing in the chat, Ivan?
Hold on. So, Patty from American University says, I work in DEI, and we have a saying in my office that it's a HOT, hot, honest, open, and transparent office for my coworkers, students, and anyone else. So it's a great point, Patty. Super, super great point. I think that's very simple, but very true to what drives that comfortability, right? What drives somebody to they may come in a tough moment, but they feel like, hey, I can talk to somebody. I can actually have a conversation about most things. So a very, very great point. Zach says open communication and anticipating someone's best intention. And Karina also says, listen to understand, and not to respond. Yeah, that's a tough one, but it's so true. It's a very tough one. Everybody's so eager to kind of just speak out, but listening is key. Listening to hear.
That's a good one. A tip that was shared with me during my career was to always have a notebook. So if you really need to get that thought out, you can write it down and hold, and then really take that time to listen. Thanks for sharing from the group. Really appreciate folks jumping in. All right, so this was a slide that I've got to give credit to Ivan, because we talked a little bit about some of the statistics that his team has really kind of spent some time collecting and digesting, and certainly we thought it would be important to talk a little bit about what happens when psychological safety is absent. So Ivan, you want to jump in on some of these things that you highlighted?
Yeah, and for us is on the tech side and really supporting you all in your efforts. We've learned one thing: in the burnout rate supreme, right? Everybody's really working hard. At the end of the day, it's a performance-driven environment, right? But through performance, you can't have the wins or the physical side without the mental side. And what is the lopsided aspects? When you think about the staff. There's less of you all. Let's start there, right? So that means there's more people doing many things, right? So grace, grace. You may have an intern, you may have a young assistant coach busting their butt. And I know that everybody loves to say that, that's how they were brought into sports. That's how they were brought into sports. But you have an opportunity to change the paradigm and add a new thing in there, right? And really caring for the people. Because when you care for people, they feel that and they want to kind of even bust their butt more for you. But burnout is a real thing, and it's something that you end up taking everywhere, take home, you may take to your kids, right? And it can have a real impact. Increase in turnover, and we'll talk about that number below, but it's really troubling to see that, specifically in the space, it could be for many reasons, but it's higher than just the normal workforce, right? And it just gives kudos to the work that you all are putting, but then also, what's on the other side of things that we're not discussing. Substance abuse is something that, it's normalized, right? Coping with 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 drinks a night, ends up catching up to you, right? Wear and tears on the body, wear and tears on lack thereof sleep, wear and tears on your next day, how you showing up, taking the stress out at home. Unfortunately, we hope that none of you all are doing it, but by accident, we're humans, right? So things can happen, things can compound, and all of these kind of have a way of coming together that aligns in a negative impact, right? So when you think about the last portion is whether you're a leader or you're new, it's super important to pay attention at 48% turnover over 2 years. And that's basically saying the people that are working next to you in 2 years, half of them may be gone, right? And that could be conducive to an unsafe environment. It could be a lot of other things, but when that happens, that not only impacts, if you're not able to kind of create a safe space for others, somebody has to offshoot their life from Kansas all the way to New York or to Utah, because you may think that there's a lot of college athletic programs or sports organizations, but there's not that many, right? And it's a small world. So, being mindful of, as you go through today and taking it into your day-to-day practices to create sustainability, how can I be an advocate? So we can kind of make sure this number doesn't grow. So yeah, that's all I have for you all.
Awesome. Well, really appreciate, Ivan, your partnership and helping us get this groundwork set up for the rest of the panel discussion. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and kick it back over to Tori, and we'll get moving on to the panel portion.
All right, thank you so much, Mallory and Ivan. That was probably like one of the more in-depth conversations, or like maybe short, but it's okay. Conversations about how to really change the spaces that we're in, especially when they change so often. But really, the one thing that really stuck with me, I was taking notes over here on the side, and the 2 biggest things that really spoke out to me was just listening to hear. Because if someone's telling you something, if someone is letting you know that something's wrong, they're coming to you because 1, you have the option, you have the power to change that, but also 2, they feel like you're a safe space to go ahead and tell them what's wrong. Because let's be real, us as administrators, coaches, and those things, like we're always seen to always have the answers. And sometimes I know we feel a little bit on the downside whenever we don't have those answers. But the good thing is that we're a team, and the main portions for your team, or the main objective for your team, is to realize those things that you can't see. So I do appreciate you all bringing that to light. And then also understanding that there is a balance between safety and accountability, and how not to take things personally is when someone is telling you that, hey, I'm noticing this within our space. Is there any way to change this? Or is there any way to kind of make this space a little bit more open? So I really appreciate that starting off our conversation today. But now I'm going to hand it over to my lovely and awesome teammate, Sarah, to go ahead and get our panel discussion going.
Thanks, Tori, for the Passover. And just like Tori, I was taking notes. Trust, effects, HOT. I love that acronym. Honest, open, and transparent. Creating a safe space. I've been in now higher education for about 20 years. So I think I've probably been in various work environments where I've seen different types of work cultures. But hello everyone. My name is Sarah Lage. I am the Assistant Athletics Director for Student Athlete Development at Iowa State. I, along with my partner Tori, will be guiding our panel discussion today. Thanks again to Ivan and Mallory for laying some ground rules to help us keep our discussion active and, most importantly, safe. Audience members are welcome to use the chat as you've already been doing, as we plan to use those questions throughout as the time permits. You will, however, have the opportunity to join a breakout room with the panelist groups of your choice after the discussion. We plan to move to the breakout rooms at the 55-minute mark of our presentation or webinar today. But first, let's meet the rest of our panelists and get this discussion going. I'm going to begin with Stevie. So Stevie, if you will, please briefly introduce yourself, your name, role, years of experience, and your institution.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks to MOAA and both N4A for putting this together for all of you. My name is Stevie Baker-Watson. I serve as the Associate Vice President for Student Wellness and the Theodore Cotula Director of Athletics at DePauw University. That's with a W. We're located about an hour west of Indianapolis, and we are a Division III institution. I've served in my athletics director role for about 12 years, but my experience in higher education, specifically small college athletics, is probably almost approaching 30 years, which makes me feel much older than what I am.
Well, thanks, Stevie. And up next is Tian Wei.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tian Wei Miller. I'll say good morning. I'm in Madison, Wisconsin. I'm the HR business partner with the Wisconsin Athletics. So I have about 15 years experience as an HR professional with a combination of my career both in China and in the US. So I'm specialized in recruitment, onboarding, and employee lifecycle management, but I'm also passionate about leadership development and inclusion and emotional and social intelligence. So I'm really looking forward to have those discussions with the rest of the group. All right, very nice to meet you all.
Tian Wei. Up next is Mallory.
Hello again. I guess collectively, I've been in athletics now for about 17 years. Spent the majority of my career in that coaching capacity. Similar to Tian Wei, just have a passion for organizational leadership and culture building, quite frankly. And so super honored to be a part of the discussion, and shout out to N4A and MOAA for helping put this together. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, Mallory. And up next is Malone.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I want to thank MOAA and N4A for putting this together. My name is Malone Silver, and I serve as the Associate Athletic Director for Academics and Compliance at Jackson State University. I've been in the academic and compliance field for over 12 years, so I want to thank everyone for being on today.
Last but not least, Ivan.
Thank you, Sarah. Once again, my name is Ivan Chachuo, co-founder and CEO of The Zone. The Zone is a mental performance platform supporting you all in your efforts to support your athletes' mental well-being and organizational well-being. So I look forward to this discussion.
I need to undo that. So thanks, everyone. Thanks to all of our panelists for being on board today. And once again, if you have a question that comes to mind, please put it in the chat. Stevie and Malone, you got the first question. How does psychological safety play a role in you choosing the institution that you currently represent?
Well, Sarah, on my end, I have to be honest, I don't think it was really a conscious decision when I decided to come to DePauw. I will say I did not have a great experience at what I would call my first full-time job. At the time, I mean, that's more than 20 years ago, I have to be honest, we didn't label it as psychological safety at that moment in time. I actually felt like I was being more bullied in that space. So I think I was just more conscious of my interactions with coworkers, and I became very observant when I was in my interview process, trying to see if I thought things could be reproduced. So to give people a sense of where my brain was, rather than my boss coming down to my office and asking something or really telling me that they thought I had done something wrong, they would send me a back end voicemail. So suddenly my light on my phone would start blinking. And I would be thinking, what is that? And then I would pick up the message to hear my boss berating me, type of thing. So as you can imagine, my light is still covered on my phone right now in my office in case I get any kind of voicemails.
I feel you on that, Stevie. Milan, do you want to follow up?
Yes, for me, the psychological safety was very important in my transition into my current institution. For me, I was being in the field and the experience that I had, being in a position where I wanted to, continue to grow around good leadership, and then also have the flexibility when it comes to my career path as well. Everyone know that the burnout is real in our field. So that was truly important to me, being in a position, being at an institution where I had the flexibility to be able to continue to grow, and then also as well sharpen my skills, and then also being in a position where I could, be flexible within my working environment as well.
Thank you, Stevie and Malone, for being so transparent about just how you use psychological safety, especially with choosing the roles that you currently are in. But I want to kick it off to Tianwei. So Tianwei, we all know that you are within human resources. So what exactly are you doing at your institution to ensure that there is a safe and sound work environment?
Yeah, I'd love to share what is going on with Wisconsin athletics. I'm sorry to saw some like people said they don't feel supportive. So hopefully I'll share, not just show off what we're doing, how awesome we are, but just help people to understand what HR are doing that is actually helping employees. Like we would do those, we would always trying to share our culture with employees, even start from the recruitment. We're trying to encourage our search committee always include minority search committee members, so they would feel that's a diverse place, even though when they look for this job, trying to think about to work with our place. And for when we have a new employee, when we do onboarding, we try to our best to share our culture and resources at the front, so they feel they're connected with organization and they feel supportive right away. And like recently, we revamped our new staff orientation to have a coffee and connection in the early morning. So we invite all the athletic staff, coaches to come to join, just grab a quick coffee and mingle with people. And then we roll into the new staff orientation. And we totally not doing the traditional lectural style. We just made it like a party, just have people to come together, know who onboarded to this organization at the same time, so they can build their allyship. They make friends right away, and also move down the employee life cycle. We're trying to really have the leadership development opportunity provided to the supervisors, so they know how to support their employee. And we also, like on our leadership development team, they have inclusive leadership cohort. So that also give the employees opportunities give them employees who are interested in the leadership skills. So they know how to better communicate with the group, just how to better build their own career. And also we have some other interesting, like we have the What's the Tea monthly discussion. It's an open discussion for everyone just to come to talk about the hot topics. You don't have to talk, but you're open and free to share your opinions on any kind of topic. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to connect with those people who don't feel support, maybe in a breakout session, just to share what we do and what we can help as HR professional.
Those ideas, the coffee and connections, what's the tea, like that's great. Tianwei. Ivan, just wanted to ask you, you talked a little bit about the zone, so can you talk more about it and what it's doing to help support practitioners as well as our student athletes?
Yeah, so how we basically seen care was specifically in higher education. There's a 1,700 to 1 ratio when you think about students to clinicians. A lot of programs work within their counseling centers because they can't hire clinicians specifically in their athletic programs. And what we've seen in the beginning was a disparity of communication between the counseling center and the speed of how athletic programs worked, right? And we helped some programs have those conversations, and then even like think about how do you bring in these people as the clinicians as liaisons to your athletic program and align them with what your goals and how you operate, right? There was no onboarding cycle. So that's the first thing what our software does. It helps give this clinician, whether it's internal or counseling center, access to anonymize and aggregate data points so then they can get more preventative and predictive on what they can do with specific teams or what webinars they need to have. But then they also are able to customize what they already have created for their program, right? Who better know what's going on campus than the folks with the data or without it, but they know they have a pulse on it. So we just gave them a system to amplify their work. And what happens on the mobile app side for the user is, we've created an end-to-end platform. As we know, 10% of athletes are the ones, actually getting the help before 45 are navigating this issue, and it could be more so. So how do we think about the other 35 and give them a technology that can help them in real time, whether it's something pressing or something that they might not know, and we're able to kind of give them real time data points on like, hey, this is what we've seen that you're going through. These are the things that we can help you how to navigate this. And then if it escalates, we help them get that appointment with that clinician. So we just created a software that amplifies the system or helps the programs get a system. And we've seen some pretty great success since launching in 2021.
Can you share any maybe themes that you have seen?
Yeah, so the biggest theme is it's I talked about this with Mallory, I think yesterday, was, for instance, within the data point, one team and an organization that school were working at, they kept seeing the performance of the athletes were decreasing highly, but the academic stress was increasing. And, we had a conversation. They called us in based off the data with our medical team to have a conversation about that. And what we found out through the data points and what they weren't seeing is once they switched practice times, the athletes really weren't allowed to have, the correct eating schedule and then also be able to kind of do their work. And once we got to the coach and say, hey, don't take this data as offensive, look at it in a different perspective and switch practice time, the performance started going back up in terms of wins and losses of the players, and the players felt heard without having told on themselves and going to their coach at a fair playing time. So it was able to kind of bridge the gap, but that's just data points and communication along the lines of the clinician and the coaches to kind of just align on, at the end of the day, the best outcome for everybody, which was, performance for the athlete, performance for the program as a whole. But yeah, it's just one of the many things. Performance anxiety is one of the biggest things that we consistently see over the 3 years that the athletes are navigating, that they struggle with. They still haven't gotten a pulse on, no matter what resources. And a lot of times the resources are there. Some of these programs, they just don't know how to identify it. And, what we tell staff, it's not you, it's just how they receive information is totally different than how you want to give it. So you have to make sure that you align it that way. But then we also hold them accountable. If there's webinars had, two people showing up is not showing that you actually care about this aspect that your school is starting to invest in. So it's a community of work, and we kind of help programs identify that, not just through the software, but just in conversation and learning. So just some common themes of things that we're seeing on the data side, the user side, and also the clinical side.
Yeah, Ivan, I love how you just kind of wove that in there just a little bit, helping just coaches understand that as a clinician, I'm not telling you, I'm not trying to come at you any kind of way or tell you like, hey, what you're doing is wrong. I'm just saying that this is probably a better option, especially if they've actually, reached out to you to use your expertise. So I do appreciate you with that information. But I'm coming back to Stevie and Mallory, I'll say. But what are noticing that you all are in very high level positions within your athletic departments. What are some of the best practices of onboarding new staff members to help them feel seen and safe within your cultures?
Phoebe, you want to kick us off? You want me to get us started? All right, you want me to get us started? All right, I got you. And Tian-Wei, I know, is going to have an opportunity to maybe elaborate on this as well, so I'd welcome her to jump in on this. But I think early on, making sure that you're communicating, what are your core values of the department? Because I think when we're faced with hard decisions, you know, turning to those as kind of your checkpoints to make sure that you're operating in a way that's consistent with those core values. And you know, here at our university, we have our mission statement. We educate everybody early on. You know, our student athletes, we're telling them this is how we operate. We're letting our staff know. But when you have clear expectations for folks, then you can hold them accountable. But when that's blurry and they're not sure where their role fits within the overall structure, it can kind of set up a narrative that there's confusion. And so I think the more clear you are with what it is that you expect, the more comfortable it becomes, because certainly having hard conversations is part of holding people accountable, but offering them the support to do their jobs at a high level is critical. So, you know, I think being able to have those conversations early, right out of the gate, is really important. And then certainly, you know, sharing about folks that they can turn to when they need help, right? Because not all of us know right away, who do I go to for this, or who do I go to for that? So if you can help say, all right, here's who does what within our organization, and here's who you can turn to solve problems in those respective areas, it equips them to get to be their own advocate, right? That they're not always coming back to you as a supervisor with a problem, but you're saying, here are the folks that can help you navigate this. And it's okay to bring me a problem, but I also want to know that you're trying to problem solve along the way, so that you feel empowered to do your job at a high level.
On my end of things, it's this idea is going to start during the interview process with our candidates. So I'm going to do a lot of listening. I like to talk to candidates one-on-one before they even come to campus, so I can learn what's important to them. And then I can make sure during the interview process that I create intentional touch points with people or places during the interview process based upon what they have told me or what I've heard is important to them. When folks come to DePauw to do an interview, it is really long for them. And so if they've been in a space where they're like, I just came for 2 hours and all I did was talk to the head coach, and I'll say, nope, sorry, around here, you're going to meet with me. You're going to meet with folks in our student affairs division. You're likely to meet somebody from admissions and from alumni engagement. You're going to meet with other coaches who are at your level as head coaches. You're going to meet with other people that are in the department, because I want them to begin to see that we are a collaborative space and that we're working with each other and that we've got this high level of communication that goes back and forth. One of the things I do during the interview process is I actually, regardless of what position we're interviewing for, if it is a full-time role, I actually meet with the candidate for breakfast to start their first full day. And my role in that space is to help acclimate them to who they're going to meet and what are the hot button issues on campus. I don't want any candidate to feel like there are aha moments, because I don't want any of my employees to feel like there are aha moments when they get here. So I begin to prep them for, this is what's going on in this office, or this is the bigger conversation on campus. That's not to say that I'm giving you any additional information compared to a different candidate, but I just want you to be prepared. Once they get on campus, if they are reporting directly to me, so all head coaches report directly to me, as well as directors of athletic training, athletics communications, facilities and events compliance, we actually have one-on-one meetings for their entire first year of their employment. And in that time, I tell them they are driving the itinerary, or they are driving the agendas of those meetings, because I want them to understand what are the things they need to come in and talk to me immediately about, which they can always come in any moment in time, but what are those things that can wait? And then they're asking questions. They may have found out an answer along the way, and that's great, but what is left in that space? When we're in those one-on-one meetings, I am often going to direct them to go have one-on-one conversations with other people on campus. So again, to build the one-on-one relationships, don't just go and meet with a bunch of admissions counselors. I want you to go meet with this one admissions counselor, because they either have some connection to you, or they're going to help. They're going to be the one who's going to most help with your work. So how do we do that? And so I do that process where, you know, the first 4 weeks, they're getting 2 new people across campus that they're meeting with in different areas. And then when they come back in their one-on-ones, they're telling me what they learned with that person and how do they think they're going to work with them moving forward. And does that differ between when they first went into that meeting, thinking how they were going to work with them. So again, to build those relationships with folks. The other thing that I do is I assign mentors in our department. So we will have every full-time coach, again, will have an assigned mentor in the department. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's you know, just managing across where it's just head coaches to head coaches and assistants to assistants. It could be anything. But again, I will have listened to what their concerns are maybe, or I will lean upon the knowledge of what's happening in their teams. So that way I'm going to connect them with someone else. So for instance, participation in Greek chapter organizations is at a very high rate at DePauw. So more than 60% of our students and more than almost 80% of our student athletes are going to be a part of a Greek letter organization. If I know that, I am going to put someone who is new and never worked with the Greek community with someone who has. Basically, I want to put them in a position to be successful. So that way they understand that we're going to make mistakes. We're going to recover from them, right? The goal though is not to continually make the same mistake over and over again. I will tell you that is very hard though for new coaches coming into these roles. They think that perfection is needed. Perfection's not. Honesty, integrity, communication are really the three things that I need all of our coaches to do. The rest of the stuff will work itself out.
That's great. Tianwei, did you want to add anything to that?
It was great to learn from both institutions, the different things you're doing. I think consider about the timing, maybe I think I will have the next topic. Yeah, I will share a bit more maybe later.
All right, sounds good. So what I'm hearing is that from Mallory and Stevie is the safe and sound starts before day one for the person to be on the job, and you know it's incorporated in that interview process. As a new assistant AD here at Iowa State, I'm definitely like writing all these notes down because there will become a time when I will need to hire a new staff member. So I'll make sure that I have these practices in place for that. All right, Tianwei and Ivan, for those new practitioners, what are some tips on learning to self-advocate? Like to me, that has been hard to maybe, to teach some of my employees. Like how can you help them to self-advocate?
Tianwei, I'll defer to you.
Sure, I can share something first. So I think consider the people who are in the early of their career. It's very important to help them to understand how to grow in their career. So when they come to a new organization, I think just setting up a career goal to know what they're going to achieve in this special organization and what their value actually in with a team. Like we encourage all the teams to do the DISC, like the profile assessment. So the team leaders can recognize the strengths and weakness of the team members. Also, as a team member ourselves, we know our strengths as well. So moving forward in a career, we know what kind of thing we could do better than others, right? Like me, I'm a social person. I would do better in the employee engagement, but probably I wouldn't do as good in the data analyzing. So for a new career person, it's important to understand what their value on the team and in organization. So when they're facing the changes or the new people come in the team, they don't feel nervous or they don't feel their value gonna be less and they have that unsafe feeling. And also it's important to set up goals at that stage of the career, just what they want to achieve at that period. Just to also like document those achievements. So they can celebrate for themselves. They can feel more confident. I think those all the factors put together, they confident about themselves, then they can start open up to build the relationships with the supervisors, with other peers. And so they know they have the confidence to start a conversation and to share what they need or seek the resources and the support. I think that is just some tips I can share. How about Alan?
Yeah, no, thank you. I have a whole nother theory to this too, and it goes back to being an athlete. You know, my coaches used to tell me day 29 is when you start to get judged, right? So the person where that you walk in as, make sure day 29 you're still that person, right? You know, you want to create and you want this trust, but you also have to earn it, right? We know that this industry is this industry, so you have to earn that. You know, you have to, how you advocate for yourself is how you do anything. You know, how you come in day one, how you come in day two, by day 29 you're doing the same things, right? Are you achieving the same way? Then you know you earn that trust of your supervisor, and them understanding like, okay, this person's for real. You know, this person has a set of practices and their values that they came in with, they still carry that, and they're not just trying to woo me or win this, they're trying to just do the best that they can. So you know, I think it goes back to that accountability factor is, you know, take onus in that, and people respect that, and then you know that naturally will help you start to get eyeballs and grow into your field.
Thank you, Tianwei and Ivan. And Ivan, and both of you all really do appreciate the fact that you said like it literally is embodied with consistency. And in order for that kind of mold to be built and for that safety to be, you know, encompassed with whatever organization or institution you're in, you have to practice it every single day at the same level. So I'm actually going to turn it over to Malone. I've got a question for you, sir. We just talked about consistency. So what happens when there's inconsistency, or better yet, if some of these things or some of these practices aren't widely prevalent within your organization or institution? What are some ways that, you know, you can you can safely practice safe and sound tools and processes?
Yeah, great question. I think the first and foremost thing that you have to do is you have to establish a foundation with a safe and sound practice with your organization. For me, I have an open door policy with my staff. It's very important to get to know your staff, learn who they are from the beginning. Don't wait, 60 or 90 days in to try to get to know your staff, but you have to establish that foundation early with your staff so they can trust you as a leader, as a supervisor as well, so they can understand your vision and the vision of the department as well too. So I think that's truly important when it comes to safe and sound practices in this role. We all know that we're in a field where we all deal with different things on a day-to-day basis. You're getting pulled from many different directions, and so you got to make sure that you're establishing that with your staff as well, so they can feel like they can come to you with any problems, concerns, any issues, or anything like that. So it's very important to go ahead and establish that early so it can be a safe environment for them as well, so they can learn and grow. Those things are very important to me. I like to really make sure that my staff understands the expectation of the job, but also that it's a safe space for them to establish how they really feel. We're all going to have some good days. We're going to have some bad days. And so if you're having a bad day, I always tell my staff, go home. And it's nothing wrong with that. I tell them all the time, like, hey, go across campus. You need to take a walk across campus. If you need to take an hour break or something like that to, get yourself at a good place, that's always important. So establishing those boundaries, establishing that foundation with your staff and your community as well is important.
I love that. That's a great gem. There are definitely things that can come in unexpectedly. And sometimes you just need to kind of take a step back. I try to tell our student athletes or ask them, all right, what are you doing for yourself today or this week? Whether it's going for a walk or, Netflix and chill, whatever it may be, just to make sure that they take some time for themselves. All right, Ivan, I've got a question for you. Can you speak to identity and allyship? How can someone advocate and be an ally when they do not identify with a minoritized group?
It's a great question. And listening, really it comes down to that one word of listening, having conversation, and don't be afraid of what you don't know, and don't be ignorant to what you don't know. But truthfully listening, right? And if you, for instance, the best way to kind of do it in simplified way is have breakfast or lunch, as Stevie said, with different audiences, right? Sit down at the table and just listen and have different conversations on different cultures and just hear how people do different things, it'll kind of help you start to understand why people do the things that they do. And they feel that when you're listening in over time, when you're making point of views, it's because they have that trust, right? You sat with them at lunch over the course of a year and really got to know them. You've done an event with them in terms of something outside of the work, right? And I think that always leaps back into the work. The work ends up being the easy part, but the people aspect is the most important thing. And at the end of the day, different communities, different upbringings, we got to just lend ourselves into each other's worlds, which will allow everything to transpire internal in the world of work. So really listening and not being so naive to the point that you don't ask the question and you don't put yourself out there in things that you don't know.
Man, definitely appreciate that. Like he said it flat out. Best way, listen. Listen to hear, but listen not to be, to be understood. But I really do appreciate that. Stevie, I'm coming back to you because as an AD, there's a lot that we necessarily don't know, especially because you are at the helm of creating a culture, especially coming top down. But what I want to do is I want to flip it. How are you actually able to implement and promote psychological safety, not only from the top down, but from the bottom up?
So one, I have to have clear expectations for everybody who's serving as a supervisor in my space, right? So like I shared earlier, I have all head coaches and directors that are reporting to me, but that means assistant coaches are reporting to those as head coaches, which means I have to make sure that they are treating those individuals the same way that I would treat them. And sometimes I have to remind them how I gave them space and grace in order to work through something, and that they owe that to them. My greatest strength, I think, is modeling the way in terms of I just have to, I got to remember not to raise my voice at folks. I got to remember that I got to lead with solutions. Doesn't mean I'm not going to get frustrated with folks, but that what I really need to do is let them know that every failure is not fatal for them, and that we all make mistakes. I've made some big ones in my staff department. And it is really icky and it is really uncomfortable, but I think it's important to show my staff that, things can move on and that we can repair relationships and that we can step forward, in all of this. But it takes a lot of eyes and a lot of ears, frankly, and sometimes stepping into conversations you weren't invited to say, hey, I heard how you handled this. Can we talk about how maybe you could handle this differently in the future? Because now they're really freaked out. But I will say this too, like we all have jobs to do. We all have goals and outcomes that we need to meet. Providing psychological safety does not mean that you don't hold people accountable. It's how you hold them accountable in the grand scheme of things. So hopefully those that know me on this webinar would agree with what I've just shared with you. And so would my staff, but yeah, space and grace. That's the stuff we talk about all the time in my department.
Man, we've got lots of gems dropping today, Tori. This is a fantastic conversation. Tianwei and Mallory, what are some tips for someone? We talked about this a little bit earlier. What are some tips for someone who is not in a work environment that feels safe? What are some things that they can do?
Tianwei, do you want to start?
Go ahead, Mallory.
Oh, okay. I'm getting called up to the plate first again, Stevie. I think, a lot of times, and I find myself workshopping through these conversations with staff, even folks that maybe don't directly report to me. I ask them for some examples, like give me some examples of what it is that you're experiencing, because I also think sometimes, and Stevie teed me up for this, I think really recognizing the difference between receiving feedback that's maybe hard to hear versus getting ridiculed, and like the how matters. And my colleague Sarah Wattenberg's on this call, and she early on in our time together taught me about, intent versus impact. And I think sometimes the how can certainly matter, and as it relates to how folks are receiving information. But I think flip it back to the staff members, say, well, what's your ideal outcome and what would it look like if you addressed it? And then really just, again, listening and holding space. And a lot of times folks actually can lead themselves to their own answer. but it's just sitting with them and helping them figure out how it is they want to take that first step. And then knowing the difference between helping them workshop through a hard conversation and then getting them connected to resources if it truly is a different type of situation. But Tianwei, I'll kick it over to you.
Great. I have very similar experience, Mallory. Like we work with many employees when they have conflicts or in a difficult situation to come to HR. So first of all, we would provide them resources, what can support them, and maybe get them through just give some tips how to communicate with the people who actually related to the situation and how to assess the situation, who are involved, why that was caused, and what is a way, if ourselves think about how can we solve it. As Stevie also mentioned, there are many, many resources on campus, not just with athletics department. And because we all have very big campus at the university, they have many groups, the very confidential groups to support them. And also always tell people to document what actually happened if you think that matters. From the beginning to the end, document everything that will help to solve the problem at the end.
Okay. I love y'all's perspective, Mallory and Tianwei, especially with you being in completely different parts of the athletic department, but also just pretty much saying the same thing, consensus. I just want to kind of open the floor up if anyone else wants to kind of just speak on the topic of pretty much talking about the fact of how sometimes these conversations can be difficult, especially for those of you that actually hold very high titles within your respective departments. Stevie. Yeah, so Stevie, when you're having these difficult conversations, how do you navigate that?
Say that one more time because my internet's going in and out.
It's okay, no worries. Whenever you're having conversations about, psychological safety and actually implementing these things, of course, with your position, how do you sometimes navigate those difficult conversations that you have to have, especially when you have a few coworkers, a few colleagues being completely open and their comments are kind of negative?
So they always say praise in public and criticize in private or give feedback in private kind of thing. And so I am doing a lot of one-on-one conversations with people, stopping what I need to in the moment. Like, I think it's important that if a conversation goes off the rails publicly, that you just simply need to stop and say, we need to separate and we need to move on in that kind of space. For me, it is about talking through how can we do this differently next time. Unfortunately, a lot of times we hurt people and that's not our intent, but we can't take those words back in those moments in time. So how can we repair in that moment? And then how can we make sure that this doesn't happen again with folks? I use a strategy, and I don't know if Tianwei would agree with this or others would either, but I use a strategy that when I'm going to have a hard conversation with somebody, I preface it with, I want you to know we're going to have a hard conversation and that we're going to come out of this and we're going to find a solution together. I can often tell by the look on their face, I might have to say, no one is losing their job today. No one is getting fired today, but something has happened and we need to talk about it. And I recognize that we may need to talk about it again. I've had some folks who have said to me, why do you preface it that way? Because I want people to be open for a conversation with me and hear it and understand that this isn't just a one and done. I'm not there just to provide critical feedback once, but that we're gonna take time to listen, and then we're gonna come back again and we're gonna bring this all together about where we're at, sort of thing. Some might say that that's too soft for some folks and I need to, be more harsh. And I would say, why do I want to treat a human being anything other than just like a human being in those situations? I will say that I think it can get really hard when you start to get I'm going to say contracts and attorneys and agents involved and all that other kind of stuff, depending on who you're having those conversations with, sort of thing. I think folks in legal would tell me that that's not what I'm supposed to say. And I would say to them, well, then I guess that's why I'm not working with agents and attorneys and all these other folks, and I'm in the space that I am in right now.
I think that's great, Stevie. Because you have my support on that. I think that's a transparency with the employee. That's awesome.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
And just so that way we can give everybody the floor. Malone, I know that you are kind of over the student support services side, and knowing that, woo, it can be a trying time over in that department. So I just wanted to know if you had any kind of comments or ideas that you'd like to share, especially with dealing such a prevalent topic.
Yes, absolutely. A lot of times people don't want to have uncomfortable conversations, and I will say the real conversations as well. But you have to have them. You have to be intentional with the things that you say and the things that you do as well too. Stevie, I agree with you as well. You got to have those one-on-one conversations with your staff and colleagues as well when it comes to maybe disagreements or not being on the same page of things like that as well. But at the end of the day, you got to establish that and just let them know, like, hey, we're in this together. We have one goal. We have, one opportunity to make sure that we're going down the right path as well, too. And so that's my job on a day-to-day basis, whether that's having conversation with my staff, coaches, student athletes as well. You got to have those tough conversations if you want to, be great, if you want to go to the next level as well, too. And you got to make sure that everyone has that buy-in. If they don't buy in into the process, if they don't buy into the vision that you're trying to go into, then we got to maybe talk about other ways of, maybe change as well, too. And a lot of times people don't want to have that conversation, but you got to have it.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that, you all. And unfortunately, our panel discussion has come to a close, but I do want to say thank you all so much for not one, just being open and honest, but two, really providing us with a bunch of tools that we can implement today, but also allowing us to provide ourselves with the grace and understanding that this is not a sprint, it is a marathon, and that change is always happening within our spaces. But hey, 'tis the nature of athletics. So what we'll do now is we're actually going to move into our breakout rooms for a group discussion. So for those that have any questions for our panelists, don't worry. You're going to be in a space where you can actually ask them yourselves. And then we'll actually come right back on into this room. Right. But I'm actually going to kick it off to my friend and lovely co-host, Sarah Lage, so that way she can get us started off with our breakout rooms.
Thanks, Tori, and thanks again, panelists. Great conversation and great book ideas and suggestions in the chat. So as Tori just mentioned, we're moving from the discussion part of the event into our breakout rooms. But first, I just want to remind you, and you'll say the date for May 2nd at 9 a.m. Pacific time and 12 p.m. Eastern time for the extended office hour event, where you'll have the time to continue building on these conversations. Definitely the safe and sound conversation is not something that we can't just have one and done. It needs to continue on. Our breakout rooms are getting ready to open, so you can now choose a room that best fits your role or your peer group or the panelist pairing that you would like to engage in. A virtual education team member will help facilitate each room by moderating a Q&A. But thanks again to everyone participating in today's presentation. This concludes our presentation, but please feel free to join a breakout room and exit when your conversation has ended. And note that the meeting will close promptly at the 15-minute past the hour. Thank you.